Good evening and welcome to another edition of Verdict 2014, your window to the ongoing assembly election process in Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand. I'm Ishan Russell and let's start with the top stories we are following today. The stage is set for the second phase of polling in Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand tomorrow. Maoist threat in Jharkhand, recent attacks in Kashmir to keep security forces on their toes. Suspected militants gunned down a sarpanch of the National Conference in Shopian district of Kashmir. Chief Minister Omar Abdullah calls for strong steps by the Election Commission. And the BJP chief Amit Shah kicks off party bigwigs arriving for campaign for the third phase of polling, addresses 4 rallies in Jharkhand. Well, the stage is set for the second phase of assembly polls in 18 constituencies of Jammu and Kashmir and 20 assembly segments in Jharkhand tomorrow. Let's take a look first at the preparations in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, tight security is in place for this phase in the 5 districts of the state going to the polls, especially in the backdrop of the terrorist violence in Arnya and Srinagar over the last week. Now, there were some big names. In fact, there are some big names, including the sitting deputy speaker and 4 other ministers whose future is at stake in this phase.
19,000 polling booths for over 12 lakh voters who are eligible to cast their ballot. A sizable enough challenge for security forces who fanned out across the 18 assembly constituencies going to polls. An additional 220 companies of paramilitary security forces have been deployed. Preparations have been fine-tuned on the basis of lessons learned from the first phase. Multi-layered grids are in place to foil any spoilers.
सिक्योरिटी का पूरा इंतजाम है, ट्रांसपोर्ट डिप्लॉयमेंट है। है मैं लोगों से गुजारिश करूंगा कि वो पहले ही पोलिंग स्टेशन पर 8 साढ़े 8 पर ही आ जाएं ताकि जल्दी अपना वो वोट डाल दे और इसमें ज़्यादा पार्टिसिपेशन करें।
The 18 assembly segments going to the hustings in the second phase are spread over 5 districts, 2 in the valley and 3 in Jammu region. 175 candidates are in the fray. All seats face multi-cornered contests. The fate of separatist leader turned politician Sajjad Ghani Lone, who is contesting from Handwara in North Kashmir, will be keenly watched. Of the 175 candidates, there is the present deputy speaker, 4 ministers and 11 other sitting MLAs in the fray in this round. Sakina Ittu is the lone woman minister in the Congress NC government. The first phase of polling in Jammu and Kashmir on the 25th of November had seen a record turnout, a mammoth 72%. Over the last week, a spate of terror attacks, first in Arnya and then in Srinagar, have threatened to play dampener for this round. But the mood of the people sends out every signal of the democratic process being uppermost. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
And also going to the second phase of polling tomorrow in the 5-stage assembly elections are 20 constituencies of Jharkhand spread over some Maoist-hit tribal districts. 2 former chief ministers are in the running in this phase. Here's more.
20 assembly segments spread over 7 Maoist tribal districts are headed to polls in this phase. In the backdrop of a threat to disrupt polls, security forces have stepped up guard.
जिला और पुटका के मतदान कर्मियों को रवाना किया जा रहा है। उसके तहत सभी तैयारी कर ली गई है। पुलिस की अलग व्यवस्था की गई है। पुलिस के लिए जितनी भी गाड़ी थी वो सर्जेंट मेजर के द्वारा वहां पर व्यवस्था की गई है।
16 of the 20 constituencies are reserved for tribals and personnel have been asked to follow standard operating procedures. 223 candidates including 35 women are in the fray in this phase. Over 5,000 polling stations have been set up for over 44 lakh eligible voters. Despite running the state government after snapping ties, the JMM and Congress are contesting against each other in all the 20 constituencies. The BJP is contesting on its own in 18 segments. Jharkhand Vikas Morcha, JVM and TMC are the other big players. This phase stands out also for having 2 former chief ministers in the fray. Leader of the opposition in the assembly and former chief minister Arjun Munda is contesting for the 5th time from the Kharsavan seat as a BJP candidate. Another former chief minister Madhu Koda, who had ruled the state for 23 months as an independent MLA and headed a Congress JMM RJD combine, is in the fray from Majgaon on a Jai Bharat Samta party ticket. Former Deputy Chief Minister Raghuvar Das is also in the fray from the Jamshedpur East seat. Jharkhand recorded a decent 62% voter turnout in the 13 Maoist-affected constituencies that went to polls in the first phase. That bodes well for this round too. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
All right, now back to Jammu and Kashmir, where the ruling National Conference says it will request the Election Commission to review security in the Shopia district after a Sarpanch belonging to the party was shot dead on Sunday night. Suspected militants had stopped Sarpanch Mohammad Sultan Bhatt's car in Nazimpora area of Shopia last night and shot him dead. This comes in the backdrop of militants warning people against participating in the electoral process. Earlier, PDP village head's brother was shot dead in Avantipura area of Pulwama district. Chief Minister Omar Abdullah said the security forces should ensure safety ahead of the assembly polls in the district. Reacting on Twitter, Abdullah said his part would request the Election Commission to review security. He said the EC code forbids his own engagement with security forces and it was up to the Election Commission to plug the loopholes. The killing comes just days after the terror attack in Arnia that left 11 dead and a grenade attack in Srinagar in which 8 were injured. Shopia goes to the polls in the fourth phase on the 14th of December.
नमाज पढ़ के आया, घर में बैठा। जब सोने का टाइम आया तो फिर मैंने आवाज़ सुनी फायर की। फिर मैं भी निकला, मैंने ये रास्ते में पड़ा हुआ देखा, उसकी लाश। बस इतना ही मेरे को पता।
And there's a standoff brewing between Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah and journalists. Journalists boycotted Abdullah's rally on Sunday after a tiff between the media personnel and security guards. Reports say journalists who had gone to cover Omar's rally in Mendar area of Poonch district were manhandled by the security there. Security officials also allegedly asked the journalists to go out and were asked to do the coverage from outside the venue of the rally. Following this, the media personnel decided to boycott the event and even staged a dharna against the behavior of the security officials. Meanwhile, BJP President Amit Shah addressed rallies today in 4 Jharkhand constituencies headed to the polls in the third phase of the 5-stage elections. Shah addressed rallies in Hazaribagh, Chhatra, Ramgarh and Swang Bokaro that go to the polls on the 9th of December. He hit out at the Congress, saying the grand old party had little to show in terms of achievement in nearly 6 decades of rule. Shah also attacked the Congress on the corruption issue. He claimed the BJP at the centre had already made a difference in 6 months of being in power and urged the electorate to vote in a majority BJP government for development of the mineral-rich state, pointing at the mess in Jharkhand over the past 14 years of multi-party rule.
जैसे ही चुनाव समाप्त होगा, ये सब झारखंड को लूटने के लिए इकट्ठा हो जाएंगे और फिर से लूट मचाएंगे। मित्रों, इसलिए इस बार फैसला करते वक्त आप याद रखिएगा कि भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार बनाकर झारखंड को मोदी जी ने शुरू की हुई विकास यात्रा के साथ।
Well, that's it on Verdict 2014. But before we go, let's look at what is perhaps amongst the oldest and biggest of the election issues in Dhanbad Industrial Hub in Jharkhand that goes to the polls in the fourth phase. Displacement of thousands of tribals here by the Damodar Valley Corporation Dam project has gained massive political overtones. From this issue alone, a lot of others arise, amounting to deprivation of basic facilities for the people. All that and more.
Demonstrations in Dhanbad demanding a very basic right. You took away our land, at least give us the basics of a new life in return. Close to 3,700 families of the Dhanbad belt in Jharkhand were displaced by the Damodar Valley Corporation Dam project in the 1950s. Elections have come and gone, but more than 60 years on, 15,000 people have still not got compensation. And many of them have now given up hope of anything happening this time either.
विधानसभा में इस बार वोट का बहिष्कार करेंगे आप लोग?
हाँ, तो इस बार कर देंगे।
नहीं दीजिएगा?
नहीं दीजिएंगे।
क्या कारण है?
कारण वही विस्थापित के लिए, व्यक्ति मांग के लिए हम लोगों को नेता कोई समर्थन नहीं दे रहा है।
हम लोगों का दुख और दर्द न सरकार सुनती है, न प्रशासन सुनती है, न मैनेजमेंट सुनती है। इसीलिए हम लोग इस बार ये कर रहे हैं कि जितना भी विस्थापित भाई और बंधु है, वोट का बहिष्कार करते हैं हम लोग।
Kishore Marandi was once a landowner. After he vacated his land to give way to the dam project, a road accident left him physically scarred for life. Yet he's kept up a legal fight. Social organizations like the Ghatwar Adivasi Mahasabha have taken up his cause. Legal notices have been sent out, letters sent for a CBI probe into the compensation issue and more, but there's been little movement.
38,000 एकड़ जमीन डीवीसी अधिग्रहण किया, 15,000 परिवार का जमीन अधिग्रहण किया, 340 गांव का जमीन अधिग्रहण किया, 5,000 घर अधिग्रहण किया, परमाणु स्वरूप सिंह पत्थर गांव जहां 1670 घर डैम में डूब गया, 80% आदिवासी हैं, एक को नियोजन नहीं मिली। और सौभाग्य है कि हमारे मुख्यमंत्री झारखंड के आदिवासी हैं और आदिवासियों को न्याय नहीं दिला पाए।
Officials of the Damodar Valley Corporation say all claims have been settled and those persisting are fraudulent.
हम लोग ने कहा ठीक है, अगर आपका क्लेम बनता है तो आप मुझे कागज दिखाइए। तो इनका कोई कागज इनका पास है नहीं। हम लोग खुद अपने लोगों को लगा करके कागज, पुराने कागज को ढूंढने के लिए हम लोगों ने लोगों को भी लगाया, लेकिन कहीं ऐसा कुछ मिला नहीं है।
The compensation issue is just one of many that Dhanbad faces. Lack of power and education facilities and poor infrastructure have dogged the area for years, despite it contributing heavily to the state exchequer. They'll play heavily on voters' minds when they go to assembly polls on the 14th of December. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.